Right, or do we just have more here in Florida?
Or do we just have a problem? And is there some systemic issue that we can address? And so we spent a year and worked in Broward County, but received testimony from people all around the state. And it had two missions, essentially. The first and predominant mission of any statewide grand jury is to look at issues systemically and analyze weaknesses and suggest fixes. And that's legislative fixes. That's fixes for things in the community, the way people can interact in a different way, whether there are issues that professional organizations need to deal with differently, or the executive branch, or frankly, even the judicial branch. So that was the first component of that. And we issued two reports. The first report.
So who did you hear from on the issue when you did the grand jury on public corruption? What kind of people?
Right. Well, statewide grand juries, like local grand juries, are all secret. So the people who actually testified before us, I can't talk to you about. But I think in any kind of investigation like that, the sorts of people that you're going to want to talk to are people who are both citizens who have observed things that make them feel outraged, but also people on the inside who can sort of tell you what it's like really to be in those positions.
Do they contact you, or do you contact them?
Both, frankly. The statewide grand jury has subpoena power. So working in cooperation with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, our state police, we were able to have access to the people that the grand jury thought were important to hear from.
So our former chairman, Jim Greer, we heard the wiretaps with him in Del Mar over the internet. I think that was the St. Pete Times that was publishing a link. I assume that comes under Public Records Act, so they could get the wiretaps.
Right. Florida has a very broad public records law, which is commonly referred to sort of as the Sunshine Law, and is really a great opportunity for Floridians to get a bird's eye view of what their government's doing. And so once discovery was requested, as it is in most criminal cases, once discovery is requested by one of the parties, then that submission becomes a public record.
And I felt almost guilty when I was listening to those wiretaps, because it's like you're in someone's home, and then they had, I think his wife was on the telephone as well. I don't remember what was in the wiretap and what was in the newspaper articles. And then even afterwards, I guess after he was arrested, there were more wiretaps of his wife telling him, "How could you do this to us?" And it all seems so personal,
right.
Which I guess it is, and it doesn't matter when it's a criminal investigation.
And I guess I don't want to comment specifically on that, but what I will say is that statewide prosecution, and frankly the work that my office did, we have built a real expertise over the 20 years that the office has been around, not only in the legal intricacies of the racketeering statute, which was our main vehicle that we used in prosecuting cases and investigating them, but also in proactive investigative techniques. One year we authorized almost 10% of all the state wiretaps in the whole country. So there's a lengthy process that you go through.
Which is incredible. There's 50 states. 10% of the wiretaps are going on in Florida.
Well,
that's amazing.
Yeah, in that particular year, that snapshot of time.
What year was that?
I think that was 2008. But
and was there a reason for that? Was it, and were they directed towards public officials, drugs?
Well, I think it's interesting. If you look at the wiretap statistics around the country, both state and federal, traditionally most wiretap cases are done in the area of narcotics. And part of that is a funding issue, frankly, because those are very expensive. It requires police overtime. It requires technology issues that are expensive, working with the phone companies and all those things.
You would think that would be a lot less expensive than actual man hours on the street.
It is, but you have to have people ready to go when something happens on the phone. Because if the bad guys say, "Hey, we're going to do a deal at 3 o'clock in the morning at the docks," you've got to have people who within 15 minutes can get there for the docks so that we can observe it and take pictures and those sorts of things. And that's what really marries it up.
We're going to take a call. We have John calling from Hollywood. Good evening, John. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks for calling in.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Good.
Good. I have I don't know if it's a problem, but a concern, I guess is a better word, because I'm a registered Republican, and it seems like our speakers of the houses in Tallahassee, our Senate presidents, and all these are finding a way, especially through the colleges, to pad their wallet. And I'm just wondering, I know you're probably not involved anymore, but I was wondering if you'd happen to hear of any of the investigations that might be going on. You know, we had Speaker Sansom, who had a little embarrassing things with a college and I guess a hangar in an airport or whatever. But
that didn't involve your office.
Pardon?
The speaker, former speaker.
It did not. That prosecution was done by the local state attorney in Tallahassee. And if you recall, even though he was indicted, that case was dismissed in the middle of trial. Mm-hmm. So he is not convicted, although there were certainly lots of questions raised in the newspaper and those sorts of issues.
Right.
He has a clean record.
Right. No, I wasn't saying that he was. I just said he had a problem with those. And it's an embarrassing one, whether he's convicted or not. I think it sheds some light on his character, and I think Senate President Herodopoulos is the same way now with his so-called book that he was paid $153 or $2,000, whatever it was, for. And also,
there was just an article that came out about that the other day. Do you remember where that article appeared?
Well, I know the Orlando Sentinel had an article
that was
about it. But I just, again, was wondering if your guest knew if that's being investigated or if it even is a...
Well, if he did, he probably couldn't tell you.
Well, that's true, too. If it's an ongoing investigation, I guess he can't say much either.
John, let me talk to you, if I could, in more general terms about the issue of part-time officials who obviously financially have other full-time jobs. Florida has made a conscious and traditional decision that we are going to have a legislature and at the local level in many municipalities where those are not going to be full-time jobs. It's a citizen legislature in every sense of the word, and they have other jobs. Mm-hmm. So there are other states that have made different choices where it's a full-time legislature and those legislators have a full-time job and they are prohibited from outside employment. But in Florida, I think that the view over the years has been that we gather some benefit from having people in government who also have real jobs. But the downside to that, or the risk associated with it, is the one that you raised, John, and that's sometimes do the outside jobs that people have raise questions and pose what have been viewed by many as conflicts of interest. And that's a broader issue, frankly, beyond just one individual elected official. And that's part of what the statewide grand jury tried to target as a systemic problem and a real confidence issue that Floridians need to have in their government.
And I think the statewide grand jury had recommended, if I'm correct, ethics legislation for the House and Senate, and there were several senators, and I don't know if they're House members, trying to get that ethics legislation passed, but they just couldn't.
Right. There were a number of bills that were filed this year, and I think there was a lot of traction for some of those issues. But with a shortened, compressed legislative session of 60 days, different priorities went out. And so I think, though, that the debate continues and the dialogue is still part of it. And I think that you've seen at the municipal level, whether it's inspectors general that have been formed in various parts of the state, or new ethics regulations or ethics commissions that various counties have instituted, that's a debate that Florida will still have for years and continue on. And frankly, that's part of the success, is to raise the issue and have the debate, frankly, on shows like yours or neighbors talking to neighbors about the importance of it.
Okay. Well, again, they sacrificed a lot to serve us up there in Tallahassee, and I appreciate that, but again, if it was a regular job, that would be a little bit different where, if you owned an insurance company or you're in there every day. But to write one book that this has published, I guess they printed one copy of it for $152,000 of taxpayer money.
Well, John, he wasn't the only one doing it. Like Mr. Shepard said, it's systemic, the problem, as came out from the grand jury, the statewide grand jury.
But it's a problem that's built into the system, and that people have to decide where the balance is.
Right.
And when he was first elected, everyone knew he was a professor. That is his profession and has been for years. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if he just recently tried to cut himself some kind of a sweetheart deal. He's done that for the bulk of his professional life.
Right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to see what you thought about it.
Thanks, John. Have a great night.
Question.
Okay. All right. Thanks for being there.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I'd like to talk about the other public officials that were the targets of your office and talk some more about public corruption. We'll be back in just a moment.